Okay, let's unpack this. We're taking a deep dive today into a really significant regulatory overhaul. It's affecting, what, about 1,300 EPF exempted establishments across India?
Around 13,305, yeah. And you're right, this isn't just tweaking the rules, it's a fundamental shift. The 2023 Exemption Manual essentially took all these fragmented rules, circulars, and put them into one strict, centralized framework.
Right. And the big takeaway seems to be this move away from exemption being seen as a permanent right.
Exactly. It's now framed as a conditional privilege, something that has to be continuously earned and, frankly, can be easily lost.
So that's what we need to get into. Our mission really is to decode these new rules of engagement. We want to understand the safeguards for employees, which seem quite strong, but also the tripwires for companies. What gets that exemption pulled?
Okay, let's start with the employee side, the safety net. Because the whole basis for allowing a private trust is that its benefits have to be no less favorable than the main ECADIF scheme.
No less favorable. That sounds simple, but what does it mean in practice?
It means solid guarantees backed by the employer. Two conditions really stand out. First, Condition 28. That's about loss coverage. If the trust loses money, doesn't matter if it's fraud, bad management, even just a poor investment choice, the employer is 100% legally and financially on the hook. They must use their own corporate funds to make the trust whole.
Wow. Okay, so the employee's contribution is essentially protected by the company itself. What's the second one?
That's Condition 7, the interest rate shield. Think of it this way. If the trust's investments don't perform well enough to match the interest rate declared by the EPFO for that year.
Which happens, markets go up and down.
Right. The employer has to step in again, use its own money to cover that shortfall, ensuring the employee still gets that minimum statutory rate. It completely shields the worker from market risk on their PF savings within the trust.
Okay, strong protections. Now, who manages this fund day to day?
It has to be managed by a board of trustees, the BOT, and critically, the manual mandates equal representation from the employer and the employees.
Equal representation. How does that actually work? Doesn't that create potential deadlock, especially when the employer bears all the financial risk we just talked about?
It can certainly lead to more robust discussions, but the core idea is transparency and accountability. Every decision, especially around investments or costs, has to be justified to the employee representatives. It really elevates fund management from just an HR task to a key governance function.
Right. It forces that conversation. Okay, let's pivot then to the risk landscape for the establishments themselves, because things seem to be getting tougher.
Definitely. Look at the signals from the upcoming Code on Social Security 2020. The legislative direction seems clear, moving away from these perpetual exemptions.
Here's what? Like a renewable license?
Exactly, a performance-based renewable license.
Yeah.
And the hinted criteria are pretty demanding. We're hearing about things like needing at least 500 members, a corpus of maybe 50 crore, positive net worth for 3 straight years.
So much higher bars to clear. That sounds like it could push smaller trusts out.
That seems to be the intent, yes. To perhaps encourage smaller, maybe less financially stable trusts to proactively surrender their exemption before they're forced to.
Okay, that's the future outlook. But what about right now? What are the immediate cancellation triggers, the Category A violations?
The priority matrix, yes, these are the non-negotiables. Breaching these leads straight to a show cause notice. First up, financial collapse. Condition 25. If the establishment itself reports losses for 3 consecutive financial years or its capital base erodes significantly, that's a mandatory trigger for withdrawal.
Okay, financial health is paramount. What else?
Corporate changes. This is a big one for M&A activity. Condition 29. Any change in the company's legal status, think merger, acquisition, demerger, means automatic revocation of the exemption.
Automatic. So the new company can't just inherit the exemption status.
Nope. The privilege is tied to the specific legal entity. The new entity would have to potentially go through the whole process again, assuming they even qualify. It adds a significant layer of complexity and cost to deals.
A major headache for corporate structuring then. And the last one.
Basic operational failure. Condition 5 relates to remittance defaults. Failing to pay the PF dues on time or failing to file the online monthly returns for 3 consecutive months. That's another immediate trigger.
And speaking of delays in payment, The penalty system changed recently too, didn't it? Their rationalized damages regime.
Yes, around mid-2024. This is crucial. They scrapped the old system of progressive penalties, where a short delay meant a small fine.
Right, you used to scale up.
Now it's just a flat 1% penalty per month, which works out to 12% per annum, and it applies from day one of the delay.
1% per month, even for a day's delay.
Correct. A delay of even 24 hours in remitting contributions now attracts that effective 12% annual penalty rate on the amount due for that month. It makes even minor administrative slip-ups incredibly costly compared to before.
Okay, so putting this all together, what's the big picture message for these companies?
The bottom line is the era of, let's say, passive PF administration is over. Compliance can't just be a back office checklist item anymore. The regulator is clearly more centralized, they're using data, and they're focused intently on ensuring benefits continue without interruption. It forces trustees and really senior management into active strategic risk management mode.
It really sounds like a fundamental shift in mindset is required.
Absolutely. Which leads to, I think, a final provocative thought for these establishments to consider. Given the rising compliance burden, these automatic cancellation triggers, especially around corporate changes, and this likely shift towards renewable licenses with tough financial hurdles, has the equation changed? Has the cost-benefit calculation for holding on to the privilege of running a private PF trust finally tipped towards just surrendering it and joining the main EPFO scheme?
A tough question with potentially significant financial and operational implications. Definitely something for leadership teams to mull over.
All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're talking about a massive, permanent change in how some of India's biggest companies manage their employee retirement funds. If you've ever worked for a major corporation in India, listen up, because the rules for your nest egg have fundamentally changed. We're going to break down exactly how. So let's start with this number, 1305. What is that? Well, that's the number of companies in India that are known as exempted establishments. These are the big players, the ones who've been given a pretty special privilege. They get to manage their own employee retirement funds in-house, instead of sending all that money to the government's Employees Provident Fund organization, the EPFO. So that begs the question, right? Does your company manage its own retirement fund? If you're working for one of these 1,305 companies, or you have in the past, then your money is part of this privately managed system. But what does that really mean? Let's get the official definition. Okay, so an exempted establishment is basically a company with a special license from the government. This license lets them set up a private trust to handle all of their employees' retirement money. You can think of it kind of like a licensed cooperative bank. It manages the money for its own members. That's you, the employees, but it's always being watched, and watched very closely by the central authority, the EPFO. And here's the golden rule. The absolute bedrock of this whole system, the benefits you get can never, ever be less favorable than what the government's own EPF scheme offers. That's the deal. So here's our game plan. We're going to look at the old world versus the new. We'll talk about the single rule book that changed everything. Then we'll get into the super high stakes for companies. And most importantly, the new safeguards that protect you. And finally, we'll peek into the future of this whole system. To really get the scale of this change, you have to see the before and after. For decades, this whole system was, well, a bit of a gray area. Lots of ambiguity, lots of inconsistency. That whole era is officially over. In the old world, the rules were a total patchwork, just scattered across a bunch of different circulars issued over decades. It was confusing. This meant enforcement was all over the place. A rule might be treated one way in Mumbai and a completely different way in Chennai. But now, in the new world, it's all about certainty. We have one single, consolidated rulebook. Control is centralized under the main EPFO headquarters, and there are strict, non-negotiable procedures for absolutely everyone. The age of ambiguity is done. So, what was the catalyst for this huge shift? It's all down to one single document. The 2023 Exemption Manual. And this isn't just a spring cleaning of old rules. No, this is a completely new operating system for private retirement funds. So this manual, it's basically the new Bible. It's the single source of truth, which gets rid of all that regional guesswork. It lays out every single stage of a fund's life, from its creation to its cancellation. It even brings in data-driven tools to literally score companies on their compliance. But the most important part? It's the philosophy behind it. And that philosophy is crystal clear. The worker's interest is supreme. This whole thing has been rebuilt to protect the employee. Now, with new rules come new consequences. For those 1,305 companies managing these funds, the stakes have never, ever been higher. The days of just passively managing this stuff are over. This is a whole new ballgame of active risk management. And the centerpiece of this new high-stakes world is something called the priority matrix. Now, this isn't just a list of rules. Think of it more like an enforcement algorithm. It classifies every possible mistake a company can make by how severe it is, and each category has clear, automatic, and non-negotiable consequences. There's no more room for debate or excuses. Let me show you how this works. Violations are split into 3 buckets. A Category C violation, something like being late with your account statements, gets you a warning, an advisory. Category B is more serious. Let's say you fail to hold your quarterly board meetings. You get a formal order to fix it. If you do it again, your license is on the line. But Category A, that's the red alert. That's critical. If the fund has financial losses for 3 years in a row, boom, immediate cancellation proceedings start. No second chances. Game over. So it's absolutely crucial to understand these Category A red flags. These are the automatic tripwires. Being in financial trouble, going through a merger or an acquisition, failing to pay contributions on time, failing to cover a financial loss to the trust, or even something as simple as failing to file your online returns for 3 months straight. Any one of these puts a company's special privilege on the chopping block, immediately. Okay, so this is clearly a high-pressure situation for companies. But what does it all mean for you, the employee? Well, this is where it gets really good, because all this pressure translates into a powerful new safety net for you. And these aren't just vague promises. These are ironclad, legally codified protections for your money. Let's start with protection number 1, and honestly, this is the big one. Under something called Condition 28, if the private fund loses money for any reason, could be bad investments, fraud, mismanagement, anything at all, your employer is legally required to cover 100% of that loss out of their own corporate bank account. The financial risk is on the company, not on your retirement savings, period. And that's not all. The second guarantee is just as powerful. Thanks to Condition 7, even if the fund's investments don't do so well, the interest rate you receive on your savings can never be lower than the official rate that the EPFO declares for everybody else. If there's a shortfall, your employer has to dip into its own pockets to make up the difference. Your interest rate is guaranteed. And finally, protection number 3. These private trusts can't just go out and make risky bets with your money. Under Condition 17, they have to follow the exact same safe, government-approved investment pattern that the EPFO itself follows. This means a heavy focus on things like government securities and high-rated corporate bonds. And, crucially, direct investment in individual stocks is banned. No speculative trading with your retirement fund. So, as tough as these new rules are, they're really just setting the stage. The ground is already shifting toward an even more demanding future, and it's all being driven by a new piece of law called the Social Security Code of 2020. Which brings us to a pretty fundamental question. For decades, once a company got this privilege, it was kind of seen as permanent, right? Unless they did something really wrong. But is that still true today?
The answer is a hard no. Not anymore. The era of permanent exemption is officially over. The future is a system of renewable, performance-based licenses that have to be earned and re-earned over and over again.
You see, this is a monumental shift in thinking. Under the old law, the exemption was forever. The new system turns it into a license that has to be renewed for a fixed period. And the bar to get that renewal is going to be incredibly high. We're talking a minimum of 500 employees in the fund, a fund balance of at least 50 crore rupees, and the company itself must have a positive net worth for 3 straight years. This is all designed to make sure only the largest, most financially sound companies get to keep this privilege. So, what's the ultimate takeaway here? I think this quote from the source materials sums it up perfectly. Trustees and senior management must adapt to this new reality or prepare to surrender the privilege. The message from the regulators couldn't be clearer. This is a new era of intense scrutiny and incredibly high standards. For companies, the choice is simple: adapt or get out. And for employees, it represents the strongest set of protections you've ever had for your privately managed retirement funds. The only question now is, how will your company handle the privilege?